Hello, welcome to the Austin Parks Foundation Park Summit Series. We're really excited to have you all today for this really super informative presentation on Parkland Dedication, the Parkland Dedication Ordinance. We'll be having Robin Haymans and Tom Rollinson from the PARD Planning Division. And just a little bit of housekeeping before I hand it off to them for the presentation. We are live on Facebook, and this is going to be recorded and will be added to the Park Summit page afterward. So you can access that at austinparks.org/parks-summit if you want to watch it later or share it. And also this will be interactive. So if you all have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and we're going to leave plenty of time at the end after the presentation. So I really encourage you to watch the whole thing. You might get some of your questions answered through the presentation, I'm sure most of it. But we will be be asking some common questions that I hear from the community, and we'll open it up to commenters on Facebook to ask the questions that they have. So feel free to use that, and I will moderate the questions and ask them of our panelists directly. So Tom, I'm going to hand it off to you. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hey everyone, I'm Tom Rollinson. I'm a planner with the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department. My responsibilities really include administering parkland dedication with new developments, including rezoning applications, as well as pursuing park acquisitions, purchasing new parks, and helping out with some of the development. And I'm joined by my colleague Robin as well.
Hi, I'm Robin Haymans. Been with PARD for a couple of years, and like Tom, I'm on the development review team for Parkland Dedication, also help out with Parkland acquisition. So basically real estate development for Parkland. So it's a pretty exciting job. And today we want to share with you an overview of what Parkland Dedication is, because I'm sure you've heard about it, but maybe it's a little mystical and hard to understand, so we're hoping to demystify it for you. We'll be using a Esri story map, which is just basically a rich format website that allows you to embed your data and maps in, so you're able to really show off all the information that you need to show off, but in a nice package. So Parkland Dedication is all about how new development brings new parks to Austin. So as all of y'all know, Austin is growing very rapidly, and so is our park system. So in order to keep up with the rapid growth, new people moving in every day, we try and we use the Parkland Dedication Ordinance to add new parks to our system and fund new parkland acquisition. So we have this little slider here. This is just to illustrate how rapidly Austin is growing. This is in 2013, the skyline from 2013. And if you scroll over here, in 2019, just in the lifespan of this dog, the city has grown pretty exponentially. So I don't know if any of you remember Austin when it looked like this and Austin now. But obviously there's a lot of new people growing into Austin. And our goal is to maintain a parkland level of service that's equal to 9.4 acres for every 1,000 people. So we use Parkland Dedication to do that. Just a note, we also have a lot more technical information in the history of Parkland Dedication. You can click here, and that is our website, and has all the really technical, all the ordinances, all the history, the case law, everything that you might need to really deep dive into this. But for now, we're going to do a light overview. What we'll do is we'll use this flow chart to explain all the pieces, and then we'll go into each piece in detail. So don't worry if you don't catch it in this first overview. We're going to go into each piece. So big question, what is Parkland Dedication? So the purpose of Parkland Dedication, we are trying to provide parkland within a 5 or 10 minute walk for all Austinites. We're trying to distribute high quality parkland equitably across the city. We want to integrate space into a compact and connected city, and we want to create a healthy community with ample recreational opportunities. And these these goals are informed by the Imagine Austin plan. They're involved either our internal SD23 goals for the city, as well as our PARD long range plan. So when a new development comes in, if it has a residential or hotel motel use, so people are going to be living or visiting in this new development, it will generate a need for new parkland. So the parkland goes through a dedication criteria process through the city's development application review process. The Parks Department gets the site plan or subdivision or zoning case, and it puts it through dedication criteria. Do we need a park here? Is there a critical lack of parks in this area? Do we need to take fees, or do we need to take land? So we can either take a land dedication, that's dedicating land on site. That would maybe be for creating greater access and connectivity, or it could be for creating a new community park. So whether that's a small pocket park in an infill, urban site, or it's a whole new system of parks through a planned unit development or a large subdivision. The other option is to take fees in lieu of parkland dedication. So instead of dedicating land, they'll pay the fee to the city, and that fee is split into two pieces. It's a land fee, and the Parks Department use those fees to acquire new parkland, so to purchase parkland. And then there's a development fee, and those fees are used to build new amenities in existing parkland or new parkland. This is a sort of an and/or situation, so it can be the case where the development will dedicate a small amount of parkland, and because they generated enough, over what they're able to give to the city, they'll pay the rest in fees. But in all of these circumstances, we end up with a new or improved park. So there's lots of avenues to get there, but the goal is to expand the park system. Here's a video that we put together. We've been working really hard on a suite of marketing, which you've seen on our Instagram and Twitter pages, to kind of show off what we've been working on in the last several years. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to talk about our dedication criteria.
Great, thank you, Robin. So when we're looking at a new development coming in to the city, residential, with residential units going to be adding to the growth for new parkland, we assess what the requirements will be using a set of criteria to decide, should this new development dedicate parkland on site? Is their site suitable to host a park there that'll be dedicated to the public? Or perhaps they should pay a fee, which the city will then use to go and purchase parkland nearby that would be better suited. Those criteria are quite specific. A critical one is whether the development is located in a park deficient area. So that means a location in the city that isn't currently served by a park. It's not within walking distance of an existing park. But we do look at some other criteria, including the option to maybe expand a park if it's adjacent to an existing one, whether the site's large enough to host a park, and whether it would, serve a critical need that we may have identified in the long range plan for the Parks Department. So those are all things that we consider In many cases, developments aren't necessarily suitable given the need to build out the residential units, and maybe there are other conflicting land uses that don't always make it the best fit. But generally speaking, when we look at a new development, we always make sure to look at whether it's located in these park deficient areas. So there's a map of the park deficient areas that's available to everyone, and it's included in the story map. You can see here that the pink on the map is the park deficient area. And again, that's places in the city that are outside of walking distance from existing parks. So the city currently has a goal that all residents should be within a 5 to 10 minute walk of a park. So we recently updated this map to use walkshed analysis to really simulate walkability of our city to find out where those park deficient areas are. And part of our job with Parkland Dedication is cleaning up these park deficient areas using the new development to make sure that we are working toward that goal of all residents being within walking distance. So just to go back to the park deficient element for a moment, if a development is located in these pink areas, they may be more likely to dedicate parkland on site as opposed to paying a fee in lieu, which we would then use to spend on to purchase parkland. Looking at the fee in lieu path for new developments, there are really two different types of fees. There's a fee for land, the fee in lieu. And this is specifically what we use to go purchase parkland. It's earmarked to go buy new parkland around the city. We've got this great gallery that you can explore of some of the parks that we have purchased with these fees recently. And one example is along Slaughter Creek Greenbelt in South Austin. We were able to purchase a section of this greenbelt using the fees that contributed from the new developments in the area. Looking at the park development fee, this is really to purchase new infrastructure, new amenities to respond to the new demand on our park system with the development that's occurring in the city. Again, you can look at the gallery that I just pulled up that shows some of the improvements that we've built recently. One awesome way that we're able to use these funds is with community park projects. So we have a number of community partners, including APF, that are able to make park improvements working in partnership with us. An example that we love to bring up is the Texas Conservation Corps. So we take these development fees and we're able to turn undeveloped parks that maybe aren't really accessible into wonderful trails and green spaces that people can walk through using, tree clearing, trail blazing, raising the canopy, relatively light touches, but can turn, like I said, a park that isn't currently accessible into one that, you can pleasantly use. One example of a playscape that we were able to purchase with these fees is at Battle Bend Neighborhood Park. So this playscape was constructed within the last year and funded entirely through these development fees we collected from the nearby developments. So looking at the fees that we have collected from developments over the years, we're on an upward trend. If we go back 10 years, we've almost doubled what we used to appropriate since 2015, 2016. And there's really two reasons for that. The first is just the incredible amount of growth we're experiencing here in Austin. As more developments are permitted, and we review thousands of permits, those are all contributing, or many of them that have residential developments are contributing to our park system, and we're trying to keep pace with this growth. The other thing that's contributing to the increase in appropriations is the change in the Parkland dedication requirements in 2016. Council passed a new ordinance that tweaked our Parkland dedication requirements to better reflect the cost and impact on our park system. So the fees that we collect better reflect what it costs for us to purchase new parkland. The amount of parkland that's required better reflects what we need in order to keep such a high quality of service in our park system. So that helps explain the growth in our fees recently. Looking at how we spend these fees, equity is always at the forefront for us when looking at demographics. We have a rigorous demographic analysis that we use, and we have a web map representing that as well that you're welcome to explore. That looks at race, it looks at income, population of children, concentration of children, and population density. So this helps us make choices on where to acquire new parks or purchase new park improvements that's going to have the greatest impact to historically underserved communities, as well as population density and those other factors that I mentioned, ultimately to help meet our goal of having all residents in our city served by our park system, that they're within walking distance of facilities that they can use and enjoy. Another cool map that we have that's available to you and to our development community is our fee expenditures map. So this map represents every development, every real estate project in the city that has contributed to Parkland dedication. And all the blue dots are developments that have contributed to our park system that we've already planned for with a project. The yellow are developments that have been completed, appropriated those fees and completed a park project using those fees. And then the pink are fees that we've collected and they're available. We haven't necessarily assigned them to a specific project yet. And you can click on any of these points and see what the development was, what the development contributed to, if it had been appropriated, and get a sense of where the development's happening and where the investments are going. So a big thing with Parkland dedication is we're bound to serving the new residents that are paying into the park system. So this map helps make sure that any improvements that we're making, any park purchases that we're making, are close to where those new residents are going to be. Historically speaking, you can see where a lot of our park purchases have been over the last 20 years. We've recently looked back to all of our acquisitions since 1998 to see where we've made our greatest park investments, and this heat map represents that. So the intensity of color represents the intensity of spending and expenditures on park acquisitions. And you can see that we've tried to make investments in the quote unquote Eastern Crescent. So these include park purchases such as the Onion Creek Metro Complex, John Trevino Jr., which is going through the vision planning phase right now. It may have recently been completed, as well as Walnut Creek Greenbelt, Little Walnut Creek Greenbelt. All of those are some of the biggest park purchases we've made dating back to 1998.
Great, thank you, Tom. So I'll talk now about land dedication. So this may be kind of what most comes to the forefront of your mind when you hear parkland dedication. So this is when we actually have developments dedicate land on site. So we look for two things. We look for park connectivity to expand connections and access to parkland, or we look for a new community park. This is Goodnight Ranch Pocket Park. It's part of the Goodnight Ranch development. It's a planned unit development, or PUD. It's a big subdivision out in southeast Austin. This is a nature play area that the developer built, dedicated the land, developed the parkland, and now maintain it. And it's nature play and is integrated into this drainage swale on the left here. So it's a good stacking of the critical infrastructure that needed to happen in this development. It pretties up this drainage swale, gives like environmental educational opportunities for kids playing here. And it's really intended as like a, you know, after a long day, walk down to this park, hang out with your kids kind of a space. So that's just one example of a park that has been dedicated. And this open to the public, not just the residents of this neighborhood. So you can go check it out as well. So when we look for parkland for access and connectivity, we're trying to expand the access to the parkland. So this could be building a trail corridor. So, you know, there's several places along the city, along rails and creeks, that we're building trail corridors that aren't currently existing. But it could also be just expanding access to an existing park. So in this case, we have a park here that's already built, it's developed, it's ready to go. And the blue represents the existing walk shed. These are all the people within a quarter-mile walk along a sidewalk to this park. The orange are the new developments that come in. And as these new developments come in, we work with them to dedicate a small sliver along their property line. It's within their building setback, so it's not impacting their building or their residential units or the affordable units at all. It's just dedicating basically a sidewalk, a trail along their property line that allows for an expanded access. So when we punch through on both sides, we actually get this big purple walk shed, and we're expanding the access to this park by double. So it's a really great way and a really, really important tool that we use to make sure that, you know, even our existing park infrastructure is, our service area is expanded through these access points. Another example of that is this Country Club Creek Trail. I can get it to play. This is along Riverside and Montopolis, and it's a trail access behind the new development. So again, it doesn't impact the development at all. This is unbuildable area. So it's a trail you can teach your kid to ride a bike. You can catch a bus from Riverside to Montopolis. It's an off-street connection. You're getting off the busy major corridor and you know, have this nice trail. It's a nice park space. It's a respite. And we think it's a, you know, a pretty small impact to the development for a huge impact to the community around it. So, sorry. If that goes small again. Got a lag. Okay. So the other thing that we get dedicated is these new community parks. So these are your pocket parks and your large, sometimes when it's a planned unit development or a whole new subdivision going in, it's a whole system of parks. So we have, you know, like their neighborhood parks and their pocket parks and the trail systems. We work on all of that. So like for Easton Park, for example, is one where we've kind of planned out an entire new neighborhood park system through Parkland Dedication. So these new parks go in and they serve the immediate residents that are existing as well as the new residents. One example of this is the Saltillo Plaza Pocket Park. This just went in and opened downtown. It's got several different areas. You can see it's right downtown. It also bundles other critical infrastructure. There's a rain garden that runs right through the center of it. So you're treating your stormwater in addition to kind of providing new plantings and space for people to work out and walk their dogs and take a break after work. So it's really, you know, like an important space that wouldn't have otherwise have been able to be developed right in the downtown area.
So that kind of sums up the journey a new development takes through Parkland Dedication, and really all of these paths that it could go down ultimately leads to a new park and to new park facilities. Parkland dedication is a dynamic and context sensitive tool to grow our park system as we continue to grow upwards of 35,000 new residents annually by some estimates. And really, we're trying to use for parkland acquisition, development, and community programs to make sure we're maintaining this high level of service, quality parks for all residents, including the ones who are coming to Austin. It affords opportunities for the city to forge meaningful partnerships with the development community as well, ultimately with the intent to create healthy, compact, and connected communities as outlined in the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan.
So the last thing we would like to share with you is this map of all of our Parkland dedicated parks. So the orange represents any park that's been touched by Parkland dedication, whether we purchased it with land fees, or we developed it with development fees, or we had it dedicated through the development review process. So as you scroll out from the city, you can really see how big of an impact the orange, the Parkland dedication parks have on our overall park system. Our park system certainly would not be as robust as it is today without this ordinance, this really important ordinance. And you can zoom in and get more information about each project by clicking through. You can see which park it's connected to and its acquisition date and things like that. So again, these tools are all available for you to explore. This is all public information. We try to make it as transparent as possible while still making it consumable and understandable. And the Parkland Dedication Gallery is available for you to kind of click through, and it'll be kind of a rotating list of the most recent acquisitions. And you can use the hot links here to get driving directions directly to the park. And you can also take a video tour of the park for the parks that we have video tours available, and that's on our PARD YouTube channel. So we're working really hard to get all these documented so that you can view the park from the comfort of your home and then pack your kids into the car to go and check it out. So we encourage you to do that, especially in these times. So, and then you can use these links at the top to navigate to any of the points that we've already covered. So that's it for our presentation. We're very happy to take questions now.
Thank you so much. I do have a few questions from the audience. I'm going to ask a couple before I share those. And first, I just want to say thank you for sharing this. This is such a great tool. I think it really helps me understand really clearly how it works. I know it's a very complicated process, but this really helps simplify it a lot. One thing that comes up, through our work with park adopters and other stakeholder groups in the community is sort of this idea, when people they understand that there's this money available and they're wondering, well, how do I apply for it? Or how do I get access to these funds? Can you talk about what sort of avenues exist that connect people to this kind of funding?
Yes, certainly. So there's not a special Parkland dedication fund that you would apply for, but there are several avenues that should be pretty well known by anyone watching this. There's the community activated parks projects, and that application form, we can use Parkland development fees to fund those developments. And then we can also allocate funds toward APF grants as well. So applying through Austin Parks Foundation or through the CAP process are the best way to access those funds. And then the other thing to note is sometimes there are cases where developments are working with the neighborhood to sort of gauge what they want. The Parkland dedication fees cannot be earmarked for specific projects at the time of development. In order to maintain sort of an equitable distribution of these funds, there's a review process that happens for all Parkland dedication fees annually to see how they'll be appropriated. So we use a matrix of equity measures to make sure that, put it through a list of factors to make sure that we're using these funds in their highest and best use, basically. So we can't say, oh, we want a playground over here and earmark those funds at the time of the development review application.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I think a good recent example for us was a group at the Friends of Gus Garcia Park had been expressing interest for a while in a basketball or multi-use court of some kind, some outdoor amenities that in a growing community. And so they applied for our grant, and then also as a result of going through the CAP process, that sort of initiated okay, now we know that there's this community need. It's for a new amenity at this park where they've already demonstrated the community engagement and kind of support for that project. And then they were able to piece together our grant with the larger kind of funds available from PLD to make that happen. And then if there's other things that they want to see there that don't fit into those, they can do some additional fundraising to augment it. So it just really shows how all these things can kind of really work together through these existing channels. Another thing I wanted to ask that comes up, I think, is helping people understand the importance of acquiring land, even if it can't be developed right away. I think sometimes people, have this idea of, well, why are we getting more land if it can't be maintained just yet, or it's going to take a while for it to be a park. Can you kind of talk about the importance of why it's important to acquire that land, even if it's not going to be immediately developed?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. In a city like Austin, the cheapest time to purchase land is always today. So we have funds available right now, not just with PLD, but with the bond that the voters passed in 2018. So we have a great opportunity to purchase parks, future parks, as the city is growing, but make sure that we also go through a visioning process with any communities that will be using the park as well before we dive right into park development. We try to talk to neighborhood groups in advance of park acquisitions that we make. We've been doing that a little bit more, just sort of assess what the kind of interest is there. But we don't want to go in and start developing parks without an idea of what the uses or the amenities should be. But really, we're trying to purchase parks on the early stage while we have funding specifically earmarked for that in anticipation of the park's development.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I think it's just so helpful for people to kind of, you're looking so far ahead at the projected growth. And I think that sometimes people don't really realize how much, really long-term planning goes into those acquisitions.
Yeah, particularly with like trail systems. Trail systems can take decades to put together. So the Northern Walnut Creek Trail system, we're still trying to connect Balcones District Park all the way down to basically the hike and bike trail. So it's kind of a big, long process that takes, a lot of time to assemble land through many different property owners. And also, you have to also consider just real estate is always moving and changing, and you have to strike while there's a willing seller for the property. So that's a really important part of Parkland acquisition, is that willing sellers have to be present. Somebody has to be at a point in their time with the property that they're wanting to sell for the appraisal price rather than above market value. So
right. Yeah. Sorry.
I can also add, when we work with a developer who's dedicating parkland on site too, they'll often develop the park with that dedication. So instead of paying us a fee for park development, there's the code, city code, and the requirement allows us to say, you know what, you go ahead and develop the park that you're dedicating on site. So what that means is really we get a fully developed park ready to go right alongside that development that we're working with. So the improvements are already there. It's constructed with the same contractors, same engineers that did the housing component. So it's a great opportunity for us to serve the community, not just with an undeveloped park that that we're hoping to fund later, but actually complete and ready to use by a neighborhood right as the development completes.
Right. Yeah, it's great that there's the combination. Okay, I will go through some of the questions that we got from Facebook. One was, if the development does both dedication and fee-based on density, does PARD use the fee funds to develop the park? And does the land given over for dedication have to be improved, or does the developer not have any responsibility to improve that land?
So if you're dedicating land, you don't have, there's not a requirement you have to develop it. It's often beneficial to the development to develop it, because really it's for the first people that are going to be using that park are their residents. So it's really a way to provide a dog park or provide an additional play space or something that speaks directly to what their residents, their constituents might be looking for in a park in that area. So it's advantageous to them to develop it. The Parks Department also tries to make sure that we're crediting the developer for the cost that it costs the Parks Department to build the park, which is generally higher than what it costs the developer, because they're already mobilized, they already have the construction people on site. So usually costs them a little less to develop the park. So they end up walking away with a little money in their pockets by developing it. And our preference is to have the park developed, just for what Tom was saying, like it's going to happen immediately. It's going to happen at the time of the apartment complex opening up, at the time of those new users needing the parkland. So that's the desire, but it's not a requirement. They could pay their development fee, and then we could appropriate those funds later according to the hierarchy of needs in that area to developing the park.
Great. Let's see, if the developer pays fees in lieu for parkland dedication, are those funds geographically restricted to that area?
Yes, they are. So what allows us to do this is precedent law, both at the state and federal level. So there have been certain court rulings that have specified how these fees may be used and collected, and one was a geographic criteria. So we've included that within the requirements for the city to expend those fees. So ideally, when we collect fees, they should be spent within a half mile of where they were collected, so that there's a really direct impact for the development. Their residents are going to have a park within that half mile walking distance that they can go and use. We do have a couple of other tiers. So if there isn't land or park developments that we can make within a half mile, we can go up to 2 miles. And it has to sort of be within the same, ideally the same park planning area. We have these larger park planning areas that are part of the long range plan. So sometimes we do go to 1 mile. We always try to locate it as close as possible to where it was collected to meet that intent of serving the new residents who've paid into the park system.
Gotcha. That's great. Can you elaborate on what developments have exceptions to PLD? Are there developments?
If there are, so commercial, currently it's only residential and hotels, so people are really living there. Residential is defined by a dwelling unit with a kitchen intended for independent living, so like congregate living, like nursing homes, or there's not individual kitchens in each room, or frat houses, or fraternity houses, I guess you call it. Those are not subject to parkland dedication. And then smart housing, smart certified affordable housing units are not. So if a development comes in and they have 30 smart housing affordable qualified affordable units, which is different than just general affordable units, but smart housing specifically. And I don't remember what SMART stands for, but it's an acronym. The last one's T for transportation. But those units are not subject to parkland dedication, but the remaining market rate units are. So we try to, make a break. And there's several other fee breaks for smart housing. And then there's other sort of nuances like site plans in the ETJ are not subject, but subdivisions in the ETJ are. And there's Title 25, which is for the full and limited purpose. And then there's Title 30, which is for any projects in the ETJ of Travis County. Has just a different, slightly different parkland dedication requirement.
Thank you.
It's, but it's all, if you go to our website, it really like lays everything out pretty clearly.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool. One question, how do HOA private neighborhood parks fit into the picture of PLD?
That's a great question. In the past, under former ordinances, private HOA parks that didn't have any public access at all would potentially receive some park credit towards this requirement. So as long as they had amenities, I think they had to have at least 3 different park amenities and stuff like that, then we gave them a credit toward the requirement. That changed in 2016. So any quote unquote private parks do need to be publicly accessible. Not to get too technical, but that usually involves some kind of easement to allow public access. So they're still owned by the developer. They're still maybe owned by an HOA, but the public should have access to them if they're going to be part of the parkland dedication requirement. They're completely private. They don't get any, it doesn't count toward the requirement. We have a lot of districts, again, I don't want to get too technical, but other, city utility districts that maybe have an HOA and they've got some kind of agreement with the city as far as providing utilities and what forth, but have like a board that oversees their subdivision. Depending on what the agreement with the city says, they may have their private parks may contribute toward the requirement as well. But those are very specific case-by-case basis, on a case-by-case basis, and each district is kind of different. So if you go out to like Sunchase or I can't think of all of them, but some of them do have private parks that aren't necessarily open to the public. They're available for their residents and they get some kind of credit, but it really depends on the neighborhood and on the district.
Okay. I was curious about how sort of what the agreement or negotiation is with the parks that are public. They're developed by the developer and they have public access, like the Goodnight Ranch, I think maybe is an example, but it's not actually a PARD park. It's not maintained by PARD, right?
Yeah, so any of the dedicated parks the developer can enter into a maintenance agreement. And sometimes it's written into the utility district agreement, like so the PUD or MUD agreement. Sometimes they're required to maintain them until time of annexation, things like that. But any of the like infill, like Saltillo Plaza, that development has agreed to maintain their park. And they're able to maintain it likely at a higher level than PARD may be able to maintain it. But generally they all still have, there's a lot of different instruments that you can dedicate land with, but if it's deeded to the city, it's, city parkland. It's just maintained by another party. So it's a management company or the HOA, and that doesn't really affect whether or not it's city parkland. It'll show up in all of our park layers as like dedicated parkland. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And it is a benefit to the city to have third parties do the maintenance, and our maintenance agreements make sure that it can't fall into disrepair or cause a safety issue. So the city will always step in if there's like any kind of safety issue, but it is a benefit to kind of everyone involved to have a third party maintain it.
Sure, absolutely. What kind of access do you require what kind of access do you require developers to incorporate so that a park isn't captured by the residents of the development and made inaccessible to those outside of the development?
That's a great question. We have certain design criteria in cases where parkland is being dedicated to ensure public access. There needs to be a certain amount of right-of-way frontage so that people could be walking. Depending on the size of the park, there may be parking components involved if there is an on-street parking. We're pretty clear about the need to have it publicly accessible and avoiding issues where community could potentially be gating or fencing off parkland. Yeah, we always work closely with our development community because they do have questions about like, well, it's, you know, access and privacy potentially for them. So that is a negotiation we do work through, but usually we come to a happy medium where we get enough visibility, visitability to our parks through right-of-way frontage, and the development that is dedicating the parkland has sufficient access, and if so desired, privacy for their residents as well. We try to encourage greater visibility and greater access for development by potentially facing their developments onto the parks. Sometimes that works really well because it means, you know, more people are looking over at the park, more people are having direct access to it. We're seeing this more with like live work units, shop houses and stuff like that. So it's something we assess on a case by case basis, but we do have requirements for access, baseline requirements.
Yeah, and the instrument that actually transfers the land to us has a public component. So the deed, it's either a deed where the city actually owns the land, so the public, so like no one private can take it over, or it's a park easement that allows in perpetuity public access. So there really is no right to go and shut the gates and close people out. People have the right to it. So that's an important component of parkland dedication, are those legal instruments for transferring the land.
Okay, that's great. I think that kind of answers another follow-up question, but the person sort of goes into more like, do the same laws apply? So the question was, in the case where the development has a maintenance agreement, is the land actually owned by the city? Which I think you answered really well. And then said, would city laws regarding homelessness, for example, be valid? Would they apply to the same land, even if it's not maintained or owned by the city?
Yeah, anything that's kind of dedicated over to us through Parkland Dedication will have that kind of park easement instrument that dedicates it, and all the park rules apply. And sometimes we can work with the developer to kind of tweak the hours that it's open or something, to make it context sensitive. But yeah, all of the same rules and laws that apply to Parkland apply to this Parkland as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that might actually.
And there's usually a park sign, like the developer is required to put in a park sign, and we have guidelines for, this is who to call for maintenance, this is who to call for an emergency, this is, the park hours, the park rules, and we give them guidance on those rules so that they match adopted rules for the city.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. I think that's all the questions that we have. I'm going to give it just another minute or so for people to submit last minute questions. I was curious, are there ever developers who express interest in going into a maintenance agreement with a park that is already existing and is owned by PARD? Is there ever like a development that goes in and says, we'd like to be the ones to maintain this space because it's next to our park and we want to maybe have a different, like have more landscaping or something, you know, different amenities that aren't as easy to do when you have the amount of land that PARD is maintaining?
So
I
much.
don't know. I mean, just
Yeah. Yes, I can think of one example, like specifically for the maintenance is one development that's adjacent to the Butler Hike and Bike Trail on the river. They installed a boat dock, and I don't think it was part of their Parkland dedication, but they installed a boat dock that's publicly accessible that they have offered to maintain the lawn and the boat dock around that area. So that's, you know, I think, you know, it obviously takes review and it's a case by case kind of thing, but yeah, that is possible.
okay. Yeah. Just curious if people ever was interested in it. I don't know.
Yeah. So if you want to maintain our parks, you know.
Yeah. Would you like to? Yeah, I think that's all we've got. We're pretty much right on time. So that works out really perfectly. I really appreciate you all doing this presentation. I think it's super helpful. Questions about PLD come up all the time. And I really appreciate you doing such a fantastic job making something that's very complicated and nuanced into something that's really more digestible, as you said. I think that the presentation is so good, so easy to move through, and then just your ability to explain how all these processes work is really, really useful to people. So I know I appreciate it. Our partners appreciate it. The community folks that we work with really appreciate it. So thank you for your time. To everyone Wilson who joined us, who RSVP'd, we will send out a link. We put a link in Facebook for the Story Maps page, but we'll also send a follow-up so everybody has that tool available. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
questions.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.